Somewhere around the year 1630, a clerk walked a muddy road in County Fermanagh with a leather ledger under his arm. His job was to count the men, write down their names, and note what each one could carry into a fight if the crown ever called. A sword, a pike, a caliver, a snap-hance musket. Farm by farm, he wrote them down in a careful hand. Armstrong, Johnston, Elliott, Maxwell, Crawford. He had no idea he was writing the opening page of a story that would finish 3,000 miles away in the hollows of the Blue Ridge. That ledger, and dozens like it across 6 Irish counties, is what historians now call the Muster Roll of about 1630. You can read it today. It was gathered and published by the historian R.J. Hunter under the title Men and Arms, the Ulster Settlers, circa 1630, and the Ulster Historical Foundation keep searchable databases built from it. What survives is a head count of armed settlers taken by a government that wanted to know how many loyal fighting men it had planted on land it had taken from Gaelic Irish lords. Before we go on, if you would like to discover everything about your own surname, this one is for you. Not just where your name truly comes from and the DNA story behind it, but some of the most famous people who ever carried it. And a few darker secrets we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Scan the QR code on your screen right now with your phone, or just tap the link in the description below, and there you can get your own personalized 30-page surname heritage report delivered straight to your inbox. Now, let us get back to the story. So, this is a video about the Plantation of Ulster and the muster of 1630, about the Lowland Scots and the border reavers, the Hamilton and Montgomery settlement of 1606, the Great Wagon Road, the Shenandoah Valley, and the Appalachian backcountry. About the people America would one day call the Scots Irish, though nobody called them that at the time. And about the DNA, because these are not just names on old paper. Many of these men carried haplogroup R1b, and by the end of this video you will know exactly which 4 surnames on that roll can still be traced by Y chromosome into the American mountains today. If your family came out of the South, and the old people always said the name came from Scotland by way of Ireland, this roll may already have your surname on it. So let's read it properly. Slowly, the way a detective reads a cold case file. And let's find out how a name copied down by a nervous clerk in Fermanagh ended up carved on a headstone in a Tennessee churchyard. The land nobody wanted to give up. To understand the roll, you have to understand the land it counted. In 1607, the great Gaelic earls of the north, the O'Neills of Tyrone, and the O'Donnells of Tyrconnell fled Ireland for the continent. History remembers it as the flight of the earls. When they left, the English crown declared their vast territories forfeit. Esceaded is the legal word. Confiscated is the plain one. James I now had a problem and an opportunity in the same 6 counties. Armagh, Cavan, Coleraine, soon renamed Londonderry, Donegal, Fermanagh, and Tyrone. Roughly 500,000 acres of some of the best land in Ireland, and a native population that did not want strangers on it. His solution, launched formally in 1610, was the Plantation of Ulster. He would grant that land to men he called undertakers, men who undertook to bring over Protestant, English-speaking tenants, build defensible towns, and hold the country for the crown. Below the undertakers sat the servitors, former soldiers rewarded with land, and the whole scheme was policed by regular musters, headcounts of the fighting strength the crown had planted. Most of those undertakers and most of the tenants they brought were Lowland Scots, and the muster of about 1630 tells you just how many. When officials finished counting the British men fit to bear arms across the plantation country, the total ran to somewhere around 13,000. 13,000 adult settler males, each entered by name, each with a note of what he could carry: a pike, a sword, a caliver, which was a lighter musket, a snap-hance, an early flintlock. Some men are listed with a full stand of arms. Many are listed with nothing but their own two hands. Read straight through, it is the single richest surname census of settler Ulster that survives. And it is the document R.J. Hunter spent much of his life recovering. Now, notice something. James was not only King of England. Since 1603, he had been king of both Scotland and England, the union of the crowns. He looked north from London, across a border that had bled for 300 years, and he saw the lowlands of Scotland packed with hard, poor, fighting families. He badly wanted to move somewhere useful. Ulster was that somewhere. This is where the standard textbook version starts to crack open. And the crack is the whole point of this video. The settlement that began before the plan. The official story says the plantation began in 1610. The refinement that serious scholars now emphasize is that the Scottish movement into Ulster had already started privately 4 years earlier, and it started outside the 6 planted counties entirely. In 1606, 2 Ayrshire lairds named James Hamilton and Hugh Montgomery cut a private deal for land in County Down. Down was not one of the escheated plantation counties. This was a business arrangement with a Gaelic lord named Con O'Neill, brokered and sweetened until the Scots held enormous stretches of the North Down coast. Hamilton and Montgomery then did what the Crown would only start doing officially in 1610. They shipped in Lowland Scottish tenants by the boatload, planted them on the ground, and built a self-sustaining Scottish colony. Hugh Montgomery earned a nickname for it that has stuck for 4 centuries: the father of the Ulster-Scots. So the first flag to raise on screen is this. 2 of the most Scottish counties in Ulster, Antrim, and Down were never part of the official plantation at all. They were settled privately, informally, by Scots who got there first. The government scheme of 1610 followed a migration that was already underway. That matters because it tells you these families were not passive pawns dropped onto a map by a king. Many of them were players, and many of them, it turns out, came from a very particular and very dangerous corner of Scotland. The men the Crown had just spent 10 years crushing. This next detail is the one the top videos on this subject almost always skip. When James became King of England in 1603 and united the 2 crowns, the old Anglo-Scottish border stopped being a border. Overnight, the frontier that had justified centuries of raiding became, on paper, the peaceful middle of his new kingdom. He even renamed it. He called the borderlands the Middle Shires. But the families who lived there had been raising cattle by moonlight and settling scores by the sword for generations. The reavers. Armstrong, Elliott, Maxwell, Johnston, Graham, Nixon. These were the surnames that had made the West and Middle Marches a byword for lawlessness, and James decided to end them. What followed was brutal. In the borderlands, people later remembered one stretch of hanging simply as the Ill Week. There were executions, forced service in the Continental Wars, and outright deportation. The Grahams of the West March were rounded up as a family and shipped first to the Low Countries and then dumped in Ireland, in Roscommon, expressly to get them off the frontier. This was a deliberate, decade-long campaign to break the reiver system and pacify the border for good, and it was still fresh in living memory when the Ulster musters were taken. And then, at exactly the same moment, the Crown opened up Ulster and started asking for hardy, warlike Protestant tenants willing to hold a violent frontier against a hostile native population. Do you see it? The Plantation of Ulster became a pressure valve for the pacified border. The very families James was crushing on the frontier were, in many cases, the families who took ship for Ireland. A reiver whose way of life had just been outlawed at home could cross to Ulster and become, on paper, a respectable planter. Same man, same sword, new country. That is the through line. Almost nobody draws. And once you draw it, the muster roll of 1630 stops looking like a list of farmers. It starts looking like a relocation record for the toughest families in Lowland Scotland. Let's read the names. The founders. Start with the men who started it. Hamilton. James Hamilton was a Renfrewshire and Ayrshire man, a Scottish agent and schoolmaster turned land speculator, and his 1606 County Down settlement is, in a real sense, where the entire Ulster-Scots story begins. The Hamiltons multiplied across Down and beyond. Follow the name forward, and you find Hamiltons scattered all through the American southern backcountry a century later. One Ulster-descended line even gave the young republic Alexander Hamilton's world, though his own story runs through the Caribbean. The surname itself became one of the workhorses of Scots-Irish America. Montgomery. Hugh Montgomery, the man behind that nickname, held the other half of that first private colony in North Down. Montgomery families spread through Antrim and Down, and then out along the migration routes into Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Carolinas. When you meet a Montgomery in the southern mountains, you are very often meeting the descendants of that founding Down settlement, carried west. Stuart. The Stuarts came into the plantation at the highest level. Ludovic Stuart, the Duke of Lennox and one of the greatest nobles in Scotland, was among the major undertakers, granted a large precinct on the plantation lands. Below him, ordinary Stuart tenants poured in, and Stuart is one of the commonest Scottish surnames in Ulster to this day. In America, the name spread everywhere, from the Carolina Piedmont to the Tennessee frontier, and it carried with it the memory of a royal house. The Ayrshire and Southwest planters. Now the Great Reservoir. If Ulster's Scots came from anywhere in particular, they came disproportionately from the Southwest, Ayrshire, Renfrewshire, Lanarkshire, Galloway, Dumfriesshire. Here is that country's roll call. Cunningham, an Ayrshire name to the bone. In the plantation, a whole cluster of Cunningham undertakers was granted the Portloff precinct in East Donegal, so densely that people spoke of the Cunningham lands. Cunninghams became one of the pillars of Ulster Presbyterianism, and the name rode the migration west. You find Cunninghams thick along the Great Wagon Road and deep into Appalachia. Adair, a Galloway family from the southwest tip of Scotland. The Adairs settled in County Antrim, around the Ballymena country and became local gentry. Follow the name across the Atlantic and it lands, quite literally, on the map. Adair County, Kentucky, is named for John Adair, a governor of Kentucky of Ulster-Scots descent. When a surname becomes a county in the American interior, you are watching the through line write itself in ink. Crawford. From Lanarkshire in Ayrshire, the old place of Crawford John in the Upper Clyde Valley. Crawfords planted across Ulster and became one of the reliable backcountry surnames in America, scattered through the Valley of Virginia and the Carolina uplands. Boyd, an Ayrshire family from the Kilmarnock country, later the Earls of Kilmarnock. Boyd settled heavily in County Antrim, the most Scottish county in Ireland, and carried the name into Pennsylvania and down the wagon road. Boyd is one of those names where, if you find it in the southern mountains, Ulster is almost always the last stop before the ocean. Wallace. From Ayrshire and Renfrewshire, the very heartland of the name made famous by the medieval patriot. Wallaces settled through Ulster and turn up steadily among the Scots-Irish of the American backcountry. The name carried a whole national memory folded inside 4 syllables. Moor, or Muir. The Muirs of Rowallan were an old Ayrshire house, and the name, often smoothed to Moor in Ireland and America, spread widely through Ulster and then through the southern colonies. It is one of the harder names to track precisely, because Moor also has English and Irish origins, which is exactly the kind of caution we will return to at the end. Blair, an Ayrshire name that carried something more than land. The Reverend Robert Blair was one of the leading early Presbyterian ministers of Ulster, arriving at Bangor in County Down in 1623, part of the founding generation of Ulster Presbyterianism itself. That religious tradition is the thread that later bound the Scots-Irish together on the American frontier, in log meeting houses from Pennsylvania to the Carolinas. Agnew, a Galloway family, hereditary sheriffs of Wigtown, with old roots in the far southwest. The Agnews settled in County Antrim, around Kilwater, and the name traveled with the rest into Ulster-Scots America. The reavers crossed the water. Now we come to the families the Crown had just finished breaking on the border. Watch how cleanly the geography lines up. Maxwell. This is the bridge name, the direct border to Ulster crossing. The Maxwells were one of the great riding families of the West March, lords of the Dumfries and Nithsdale country, feuding for generations with the Johnstones across the water meadows of Annandale. When the frontier was pacified and Ulster opened, Maxwells crossed. In America, the name settles right into the backcountry pattern, and it carries the unmistakable fingerprint of the Scottish border built into it. Johnston, or Johnstone. An Annandale border name, the Maxwells' ancient enemy. In Ulster, the Johnstones settled heavily in County Fermanagh, and Johnston is today one of the single most common surnames in the whole province. Read the 1630 muster and the name appears again and again. Follow it forward and you find Johnstons and Johnsons all through the American South and the mountains, a name so common it is easy to forget. It began as a reiver family on a river in Dumfriesshire. Armstrong, the classic case. The Armstrongs of Liddesdale were perhaps the most feared riding surname on the entire frontier, the family of the outlaw Johnny Armstrong, hanged by an earlier Scottish king. When their world ended, Armstrongs transplanted to Fermanagh and Tyrone in real numbers. And the arc keeps going. Reiver to Ulster planter, to Appalachian settler. It is not a coincidence that when a man from a family of border cattle raiders stood on the moon and said his name, that name was Armstrong. Elliott, another Liddesdale riding surname, feared alongside the Armstrongs in the debatable lands. The Elliotts settled in Fermanagh, close by the Armstrongs, and the two names traveled together across the Atlantic just as they had ridden together in Scotland. In the southern mountains, Elliott is a quiet marker of the same violent frontier ancestry. Dunbar, a Border and Lothian name tied to one of the great strongholds of the East. Dunbar undertakers planted in Cavan and Fermanagh, and the name spread with the rest of the plantation stock into America. Hume, or Home, a Berwickshire border name from the East March, the country of the Homes who guarded the Tweed. Hume and Home families came into Ulster with the wider Scottish settlement, another frontier surname carried west by the same currents. The Undertakers and the Notables. A few more names, each with a specific fingerprint worth naming out loud. Atchison, sometimes spelled Atchison, an East Lothian family. Sir Archibald Atchison was granted plantation land in County Armagh and founded the town of Market Hill. His descendants became the Earls of Gosford. The name traveled to America with the rest of the Ulster-Scots stream and is a reminder that the planters ran the whole social range, from riding families to knighted courtiers. Alexander. From Menstrie, in Clackmannanshire, near Stirling, the home of Sir William Alexander, Earl of Stirling, poet and colonial promoter. The Alexander name spread through Ulster and became strikingly common in the American backcountry. When the men of the southern mountains marched over the ridges in the Revolution, Alexanders marched with them. It is one of the signature surnames of Scots-Irish America. Buchanan, a Stirlingshire clan name. Buchanans planted in Ulster like the rest, and here the through line reaches all the way to the White House. James Buchanan, the 15th President of the United States, was of Ulster-Scots stock. His father emigrated from Ramelton in County Donegal, one of the plantation counties, before settling in Pennsylvania. A name copied onto a muster of armed Donegal settlers in 1630 ends, 8 generations later, in the presidency. If you are finding this useful, take a second and subscribe. We follow one family line out of the old country and into America every week, and we are barely halfway down this particular roll. While all of this was being written down in Ulster, something else was already in motion. The families on that roll had one more ocean to cross, and 4 of their surnames are the ones the Y chromosome can still track into the American backcountry. A century later, on a different frontier. So the roll is read. Now watch what happens to it. For most of the 17th century, these families dug in across Ulster. They farmed, they built Presbyterian congregations, they intermarried, and they held a hard country. But by the early 1700s, their situation soured. Rents were raised savagely on the Ulster estates. A run of bad harvests hit, and as Presbyterians, they were dissenters under an Anglican establishment that barred them from full public life. They had held the frontier of the crown for 100 years, and the crown had little to offer them in return. So they left again. In wave after wave through the 1700s, tens of thousands of Ulster Scots took ship for America. most of them landing at Philadelphia and Newcastle on the Delaware. And the geography now does something remarkable. They did not stop in Pennsylvania. They pushed straight to the edge, down through the Cumberland Valley, onto the Great Migration Route the maps call the Great Wagon Road, southwest into the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and on into the Carolina and Tennessee backcountry. They took the roughest, most exposed land on the colonial frontier, the same kind of dangerous borderland their ancestors had always lived on. And they took it for the same reason. It was theirs to fight for. The historian David Hackett Fisher wrote the definitive account of this in his 1989 book, Albion's Seed: 4 British Folkways in America. His argument, in the plainest terms, is that the culture of the Appalachian backcountry is a direct transplant of the culture of the British borderlands. The fierce independence, the clan loyalty, the music, the speech, the readiness to fight. Fisher's point is that the border did not end at Liddesdale or Annandale. It moved to Ulster, and then it moved again to the American mountains, carrying the same families and the same ways. And notice the surnames that lead the way: Armstrong, Johnston, Elliott, Maxwell, Crawford, Cunningham. The reiver names and the Ayrshire names together, the exact surnames that Clerk wrote down in Fermanagh in 1630, are the surnames on the earliest deeds and militia rolls of the Shenandoah and the Southern Mountains 100 years later. The paper trail is continuous. Same names, same frontier temperament, new continent. Now flag one thing plainly, because this audience will hold us to it. The word Scots-Irish is a later American label. Nobody in Ulster in 1630 called themselves Scots-Irish. They said Ulster-Scots, or simply Scots. The hyphenated term came into wide use in America, partly to distinguish these older Protestant arrivals from the Catholic Irish who came later. So, when you hear Scots-Irish, hear a name America gave them, not one they gave themselves. And flag the second thing just as plainly. Not every planter was Scottish. The plantation deliberately included English undertakers too, and the 1630 muster records English names alongside the Scottish ones, especially in parts of Armagh, Cavan, and the Londonderry lands, run by the London companies. The English element was real. It is a mistake to imagine Ulster in 1630 as purely Scottish. It was mostly Scottish in the north and east, genuinely mixed elsewhere. What the DNA actually says. So the history is clean. The names line up. But this is a channel about genetics, and history alone is not proof. So let's test the paper trail against the genome, carefully, and with real sources rather than hype. Start with the deep background. Across the British Isles, the dominant Y chromosome haplogroup is R1b, and specifically the branch geneticists label RM269 and its many downstream subclades. If you carry a Y chromosome and your fathers came from Britain or Ireland, the odds are heavy that you sit somewhere under R1b. That is the shared canvas. On its own, it tells you almost nothing specific because it is common to Scot, Irishmen, and Englishmen alike. The signal is not in the broad haplogroup. It is in the fine structure. And R1b does split into meaningful branches. 2 are worth naming because this audience already knows them. The subclade or L21, sometimes written M529, is heavily concentrated in the insular Celtic populations, dense in Ireland, in the Scottish Highlands, and in Wales. The subclade RU106, sometimes written S21, leans the other way, toward the English and the continental Germanic input, the Anglo-Saxon layer. Now think about a Lowland Scot from the border country. His ancestry is a frontier blend, part Gaelic and Brittonic, part Anglian and Norse and English, ground together over 1,000 years on a contested edge. So the Ulster-Scots planters do not come out as pure L21 or pure U106. They come out mixed, exactly as their history predicts. That blend is itself a fingerprint, and the fine structure has now been mapped. In 2015, a team led by Stephen Leslie published a landmark paper in the journal Nature, titled "The Fine-Scale Genetic Structure of the British Population." It was the flagship result of the People of the British Isles project. What they found is that Britain is not one genetic blur. It resolves into around 17 distinct regional clusters, and crucially, several of those clusters sit in Scotland and along the old border country. The lowland and border populations carry a genetic signature you can actually distinguish, which means the reavers survive, faintly but measurably, as a genetic signature and not only as a chapter heading. Then cross to Ireland. In 2017, a team led by Edmund Gilbert published the Irish DNA Atlas in the journal Scientific Reports. They broke the population of Ireland into 10 fine-scale genetic clusters. One finding matters for us above the rest. In the north of Ireland, in Ulster, they identified a cluster that shares a strong component of ancestry with Scotland and Britain, exactly consistent with the plantation. A later study, Byrne and colleagues in the journal PLOS Genetics, in 2018, working on insular Celtic structure, found the same thing. There is measurable British and Scottish admixture concentrated in Ulster, layered on top of the older Gaelic Irish population. The genetics confirm what the muster roll implies. A distinct population of Scottish origin settled the north of Ireland in the 17th century, and 4 centuries later you can still see it in the DNA of the living. Now, the last link, from Ulster to the American mountains. This is where honesty matters most, because the sophisticated version of this story is more interesting than the hyped one. There is not yet a single great peer-reviewed paper that scoops up the Appalachian population and formally traces its clusters back to Ulster the way Gilbert did inside Ireland. What we have instead is the surname evidence, and it carries real weight once you understand what it is. For decades now, projects hosted at Family Tree DNA have gathered Y chromosome results from thousands of men grouped by surname. There are large Armstrong, Johnston, Maxwell, and Elliott surname projects. There is a dedicated Border Reavers DNA project. These are citizen science, run by volunteers, not peer-reviewed journals, and that limitation should be stated out loud. But what they show is striking. Living men named Armstrong in Tennessee and living men named Armstrong in the Scottish borders repeatedly share the same detailed Y chromosome signatures, the same subclades, and the same marker values, at a resolution far finer than any broad haplogroup. The reaver surname and the reaver Y chromosome DNA traveled together from Liddesdale to Fermanagh to the American backcountry, and the male line can still be matched across all 3. Which brings us to the mildly uncomfortable point, and the one your consumer DNA test will not tell you. If you spat in a tube for Ancestry DNA or 23, and me and it came back Scotland or Ireland or England and Northwestern Europe, that autosomal ethnicity estimate is real, but it is blunt. Those reference panels are built to resolve broad regions, and they were never designed to separate an Ulster-Scots border family from a generic Scottish or Irish or English one. The Ulster-Scots signal, the specific border to Ulster to Appalachia story, tends to dissolve into a vague Scottish and Irish reading that could describe almost anyone from the British Isles. The finer resolution, the part that actually pins your family to the reavers and the planters, lives in the Y chromosome surname projects, not in the pie chart. That is not a flaw the tests admit to easily, but it is why so many people with deep Ulster-Scots roots look at their results and feel the reveal was, in their own words, hardly shocking. The tool was pointed at the wrong resolution. Is yours on the roll? So look at where we have arrived. A clerk in Fermanagh around 1630 wrote down the armed men of a confiscated country. Armstrong, Johnston, Elliott, Maxwell, Crawford, Cunningham, Hamilton, Montgomery. He was recording, without knowing it, families that had been pacified reavers on the Scottish border a generation before and would become Appalachian pioneers a century after. The Plantation of Ulster was not a clean scheme that began in 1610. It began privately in 1606 in County Down, and it drew disproportionately from the toughest frontier families in the Scottish Southwest. Those families held Ulster for 100 years, then crossed the ocean and took the hardest ground in colonial America. And the border culture that David Hackett Fisher traced in Albion's Seed is their culture. The genetics, from Leslie's Nature paper in 2015 to Gilbert's Irish DNA Atlas in 2017, confirm a real, measurable Scottish population layered onto Ulster, and the surname Y chromosome DNA projects trace the male lines all the way to the mountains. Now the honest caution, because you have earned it and because it is the truth. A surname is not a chromosome. Names were adopted, changed, spelled a dozen ways, and given to servants, stepchildren, and strangers. A Maxwell in Tennessee may descend in the direct male line from the reavers of Nithsdale, or may carry the name through marriage, migration, or accident, with an entirely different Y chromosome underneath. Finding your surname on the 1630 muster is the beginning of an investigation, not the end of one. It is a lead. To turn a lead into proof, you follow the paper down through the parish registers and the land grants, and you test the Y line against the surname project. That is how a cold case gets solved. Patiently, one document at a time. But the lead is real. The roll exists. It has names on it, and one of them may be yours. R.J. Hunter's Men and Arms is in print, and the Ulster Historical Foundation databases are searchable. So if the old people always told you the name came from Scotland, by way of Ireland, into the mountains, you now know exactly where to go looking. Start with the muster of 1630. Read for your surname, and then start following it home. If a name in this video is your name, tell us in the comments where your family landed in America and which county in Ulster you think they left. We read every one, and the corrections and family stories you leave are half of why this channel exists. If you want more of these forensic reveals, tracing real surnames from the homeland into the American bloodline, subscribe and stay with us. There are a great many names still on the roll, and we are going to read all of them.